Hello War of the Visions fans, I'm Jackie Fox, and we're doing a relatively simple one today, but these videos are always pretty popular, and I feel like they really help out newer players. So today we're going to be talking about the top 23 units that aren't limited in War of the Visions, and I am including a lot of units that are the Veritas units, so they are kind of limited in how fast you can build them. But anyone can get them, and especially with like Veritas of the Flames, they're very much participation based for the most part in how you get the rewards, so really anyone could have these characters. There are also a lot of characters that are limited to collaboration, or that are limited to events for another story, but these characters, especially the most recent set of them, tend to come around quite often. It might be a little bit harder to get Roth though. Just putting that out there. But basically all of these characters can even be pulled on like free tickets now. Ramada hasn't quite made it over to the free ticket pool, but Shurika, Gilgamesh, and a lot of other newer characters are. Also, just to say that while there has been a lot of power creep in the game recently, some dynamics have changed because of that. And they have been in flux because of that, and this is a significantly different state than we were in before. And I think it really kind of tears out the top units. But at the same time, like in the grand scheme of the game, there's over 200 characters. So this is definitely the cream of the crop. Even if you're in the lowest tier here, you're still doing pretty good, or at least you've been doing pretty good lately. It also doesn't mean that you need all of the newest characters to create a great team. You probably will want one of them to build your team around, but I would say choose your first character from a high tier, or choose the highest tier character you can, and then look below them and try to find synergies and ways to build a team that maximizes what they do well. So looking at the very tippity top tier, the God tier, obviously at the very top of this is Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is incredibly powerful, incredibly penetrative. He does a lot of damage. He has fairly unique strategies that just go so far in shutting down other teams and dealing damage in a way that just overwhelms other teams. He also has a lot of strategic potential because of the same skill in Manual, where basically any character that can carry damage across the map with long range and good AoE can really do some insane shenanigans beside Gilgamesh. So just a really powerful character. There isn't a ton that Fire can do about him at the moment, because they don't necessarily have a ton of overwhelming power. They do have One Wing Sephiroth, but he's not necessarily the strongest thing. He is powerful, generally speaking, and might counter Gilgamesh in some ways. But like, you really want to get through this guy fast. That's the only way to take him down, like to really combat him. You've got to get him off the board before he messes you up, because he will mess you up. And he is kind of hard to take off the board. Now, for Shurika and Ramada, they tend to be a bit easier to take off the board, especially Shurika. Now, Shurika does have a physical HP shield, which keeps her safe in the beginning, at least from physical damage. And the Ramada does have courage, which keeps her safe in the end, at least for one more hit. And these characters, respectively, are both scary on offense, because they're top tier DPS, but they also, for Shurika, she's going to have a follow-up hit, which is basically going to negate courage completely while just pumping up your damage a lot. Another follow-up hit character like Gilgamesh, but she follows up her own hits, whereas Gilgamesh follows up other people's hits, which means that Gilgamesh and Shurika together can do a one hit that then hits 2 more times due to each of them getting a follow-up hit in. Whereas the offensive capability of Ramada is more linked to CT shenanigans and cursing people. And she is, at this moment, the best character for cursing other units in the game. She edges out Sephiroth, and I think eventually Veritas of the Frost might come around to compete with her in this format, and we'll probably have new characters to compete with her for that title in the future. But for right now, she's the best Curse character, and Curse is very powerful. Speaking of very powerful, the most powerful healer in the game right now is probably Lucielle. She's the one that I see on the most good teams, at least for non-limited characters. There's definitely an argument to be made for the best all-around healer probably being Summer Resnick, But this isn't a limited characters video, so we're putting Luciel at the top because she's on many of the best teams. And this is because when she was coming out, you'll remember, it didn't seem like we needed healers because all of the new characters did a ton of damage and healed back tremendously from the damage they did. They were basically self-healing. And for a while, that remained the case, but once we started seeing teams of new characters versus new characters, some of those characters did a little bit less damage. And because of that, they healed a bit less. And now there's all these countermeasures to healing as well, and just a whole bunch of ways of screwing around with that. So, for one, these characters aren't surviving as easily as they used to, and two, the characters they're going up against are surviving their hits, so they're managing to stick around and do more damage. And all of this creates the situation where healers can come in and change the game. There wasn't really enough time because damage was too spiky, but now that the meta has evened out, now that there's more new characters at this new power level and they can fight each other, it's not so one-sided against the older guys anymore. I mean, it still is, but not everybody is using them in the same way that they were. This means that, again, there's kind of a place for healers to work, and she is, at least in testing, looking to be the best of the healers. Even though she doesn't have any way of interacting with Curse that I remember, she is a master at healing people before they need it, and adding kind of heals to them and healing over time in a really cool way that I think just does healing better than most supportive characters do, while also being able to just heal massively and give characters re-raise, which is pretty important. I mean, Shurika needs re-raise. Gilgamesh, Ramada, everyone in the second tier except for Helena are all courage characters at best, so they all want re-raise as well. So she has something to offer to the two top tiers of characters. She could match up with any of them and have something to do there. That makes her quite key. Then we have the pretty damn good tier, and you can still build teams around them, and they're going to perform very well all the way up into the top tier. They're going to start to underperform against teams with Gilgamesh, Shurika, Ramada, and Luciel. These newer characters are really going to give you a little bit of trouble, but you still might have a shot. You know, you're not completely locked out of the game if you don't have access to that highest tier. It's just those are going to be the best shot you have. So Ashen Mont leads up this tier because he's incredibly durable while also being incredibly damaging. He also has follow-up damage like Shurika, also breaks single target, has the ability to just assault a bunch of single target. He's not necessarily good into magic, but he's really good at sleeping and silencing people, so he can work well into high faith teams pretty effectively, and just, yeah, he's got everything you really want in a kit. He can also use the Blood Sword. He's the first character other than Gilgamesh so far that I mentioned you're going to use the Blood Sword to add kind of a passive permanent HP regen to his skills. He's quite good at using that and his durability to keep him in a match. Whereas for June, she has a lot of defense against magic, a lot of ways of kind of negating barriers to her damage, which allows her to heal more because she has, you know, kind of a 3 or 4 turn HP drain mechanic to her. This isn't permanent like the Blood Sword, but it is a lot more spiky. Like, Mont is healing back incrementally as he deals damage, whereas June could go from basically like 20% health to 100% health if she hits enough characters hard enough. She can very easily do that, and this can mean that in a lot of ways you can't always count her out of a match. And every turn that she has the opportunity to hit someone, she has the opportunity to make an absolute comeback. She is one of the best characters for making this type of comeback, especially in the non-limited pool, except for like Gilgamesh is pretty good at it, and sometimes Ramada can do it too. She's kind of built that way as well. Shurika can as well. It's just that Shurika and Ramada tend to be the less durable and tanky, whereas Gilgamesh and and June have more opportunities to take advantage of this because of their enhanced durability. First of our Veritas units, Veritas of the Heavens. And I put him above the other Veritas units, even though I think that in some ways he's one of the weaker ones, just by a little bit. But he also has more relevant matchups. He can work well with more relevant characters that I've already mentioned than anybody else. I mean, or almost anybody else. He works very well with Shurika. He works very well with Ramada. He works very well with Luciel. He can also pair pretty well with anyone who is using any of these characters and wants to have a better matchup into Earth. There's a lot of Ashramon out there. Sodley's coming in the future, and he does deal with those Earth teams pretty darn well. So he just kind of has a spot. He can really do some good stuff. And then we have Helena the Black Rose. Now, this character is powerful for a number of reasons that are going to keep her relevant a lot longer, I think, than other characters. And when she was first released, she was the queen of the show, absolutely. Even though she hadn't married a king yet, she was still a queen to us. And a big part of that is, you know, just the baseline is she's a magic DPS with high AoE damage, AoE breaking, a lot of other like debuffs and that type of stuff in her kit. Also good at healing herself back in a number of ways. Not as good as modern units, but she does have like sequence healing. She does have the ability to heal on KO. Those things are pretty inconsistent, don't trigger as often during a fight as all of the other healing methods that I've mentioned so far. And every DPS except for Veritas of the Heavens has had those up to this point. So she's a little bit weaker in that respect, but she makes up for it a bit with having a big AoE sleep that has a very high chance of sleeping people. And also her LB, in addition to having a heal, has reflect on it. And this is proving to be a really incredible into her matchup with Shurika and other magic units. It's always been like that, but the meta being more dominated by physical units means that in most fights, her reflect just didn't do anything. It was a wasted effect on that skill. But once you get her into like a more magical meta where there are magic characters for her to be countering, especially magic characters that don't take magic damage well and have reflectable kits, much like Shurika, you know, she can absolutely wreck people. So she's in the meta she's in this tier much like Veritas of the Heavens because she happens to be a really strong counter to a number of things that are in the meta. Also being able to work with a lot of the units below her and work pretty flexibly on teams because in a lot of ways she is just a curveball character, so she can be a one-off unit. She'll still have the ability to reflect and to sleep, even if she doesn't perfectly synergize with your vision cards and your other team members. Moving into the It's Alright tier, we have our other healers and tanks, for the most part. So, Veritas of the Earth, I think, if you fully build him and have the right build for him, I think he's probably the strongest tank in the game in a lot of ways. I think he has more direct healing potential than the other tanks here, and that's a pretty big thing for him. And it also does a lot of other things for him. Like the self-healing for Oldoa can feel a little bit janky for the most part. And for Dario, actually Dario's ability to heal himself and others is pretty good, but it also isn't always enough to heal him all the way back up the same way that Veritas of the Earth can. So Veritas of the Earth is a very interesting and powerful tank in that, you know, he's a character that has a very valid way of healing himself and even buffing himself and recovering his AP in the midst of a fight, which is just really good for him. He also has a lot of good potential, and as a Veritas unit, he has access to some great equipment. The Legendary Reliquaries equipment works really well for him, specifically the Maximilian armor, which should be getting an upgrade in the next couple of months to be even stronger, is just incredible with him as it is. And if it gets even better synergized with him as it upgrades, he could become a very powerful character. Next up is Fina, Lotus Mage Fina, the new UR Fina. She is an incredible healer. She has very good range as a healer, which keeps her safer than most healers. She also has the ability to heal Curse before her LB heal lands. It is basically the only way that she has to heal Curse in her kit, though. It's well timed, but this is a pretty perfect counter for a character like Sephiroth. But it does tend to fail a little bit more into longer matches against characters like Ramada or maybe Veritas of the Frost into the future. This isn't that big of a deal because if you can at least get rid of one instance of Curse, that's pretty good. But unlike Sephiroth, that doesn't mean you lock them out of cursing you for the game because all of their curse moves are spent. They have more. So that can be a little bit troublesome for her. She's also not... Her heals don't have as good of timing as Luciel's. And it's kind of hard to explain what I mean by that. I did a video comparing the two of them as healers and why I think Luciel's heals are more important. But basically, Luciel heals people in advance. She has ways of adding heals to people that will kind of trigger when they need to, so that she doesn't have to rely on her timing being perfect. She can make the heal time itself perfectly, and that's pretty good. And Fina doesn't have nearly as much of that. She just has great range, and I think that's also strong for another reason. And it's not that she's not on good teams and that she's not powerful on teams for a lot of the same reasons as Luciel and Summer Resnick for that matter, who she probably compares a lot better to directly. At the same time, I just don't see her doing well in the data. I don't see her on the best teams. I don't see as many people using her, for one. But even when I do see her used, she tends to underperform other comparable healers like Luciel. So she's good, but she's not the best. Then looking at Uldoa, this is an incredible physical tank. She has the best physical aura. Now, Veritas of the Earth has a physical and magical aura, but it's not as strong as Uldoa's or Dario's, who have physical and magical auras respectively. Also, auras that allow them to do a lot of other things. Dario's resists a whole bunch of status ailments around him, which is pretty cool, one of them being sleep, which can be really important in certain matchups. But for Uldoa, her physically defensive aura can also give people things like it'll nullify CT down for your allies, and it will also give them the ability to remove re-raise on hit, which is really powerful and really nuts into the right team. And also a decent way of countering Luciel in a lot of ways. She's also really good into single target damage, so she's good at really keeping a handle of Ashen Mont, because she can take care of him pretty well. And she can keep up with him pretty well. Like, she can compete with him. She's not really going to take him down herself as she is a tank, but she can keep her from taking your team down in a lot of ways. And then for Dario, one of his benefits is being a katana character. Now, there aren't really any other good synergies for katana within non-limited characters, at least not within the top 23 up here, but katana teams are quite powerful. Also, Dario just seems to fit in pretty well on fire and wind teams alike. So he does really well with like Veritas of the Winds and Shurika. They're a pretty stonking good team. He has the ability to heal others while healing himself, while increasing his hate, while dealing guaranteed hit damage. Very good skill in Triple Drain, I believe. And that and his auras just make him a really stubborn tank, and also one that can kind of help into matchups against evasion. He's not going to do it all himself. Again, he's the tank, don't look for damage from him, but he can do some damage, especially on the right katana or wind team that's really got him maximized. And then finally, in the alright tier, we have Veritas of the Waters. She does a lot of things offensively and defensively. She's a very complex character, and she's very hard to like pin down and describe. She can give a lot of elemental resistances. She can take a lot of elemental resistances away. She can buff your party. She can debuff the opponent's party. And she can do all of these things better than most characters can. So she can be really impactful for, quote unquote, turning the tide of battle. Yep, that pun, that just happened. Alright, moving on into the next tier, which is the, okay, you know, these guys, I don't prefer any of them, really, at this point. But they're not bad. If you can find units above them to play with them, they still do very well in supporting these characters, but you're not building a team around them. First, we have Elia the Alabaster. Biggest deal with this character is that she can remove re-raise really effectively. She can give a whole team the ability to remove re-raise really effectively. She can break lightning resistance very, very well. Probably better than any other character in the game. And in addition to all that, the piece de la resistance on her kit is that she can hit 3 characters at once from basically an unlimited range, or at least one of the longest ranges in the game, while reducing their CT and carrying across effects like removing re-raise and stuff like that. It's really quite powerful, and when you think about it, in PvP, this basically negates tanks, because if you get everyone within range, which is quite easy to do with her, you're just going to hit everyone on their team. Their tank can survive this pummeling over and over again, that's fine, but especially without auras, it's going to be hard for a tank to defend the rest of your team against that damage. And if all of your characters die except for your tank, it's not going to survive very well against her. Volke has a lot of auras that are really cool. Spirit, unit attack resistance, both very strong. Single target magic damage just is not good into him because of his aura. And this can mess with a lot of the black mage teams, which are quite powerful. Maybe between like Shurika, Oldoa, and Helena, they all have a lot of single target moves, and this really plays into that well. So he's kind of the single target version, single target and maybe a little bit more magically leaning version of Oldoa. But he is lower cost, he is a little bit weaker in some ways. He can do decent damage on a Lance team. You don't really see this guy on fire. You saw him with fire a little bit after he was released, but really where he seems to be most relevant is on future Lance teams. He's very strong with Ramada, with Veritas of the Heavens, for instance. You're probably more likely to use him with those than you are with other fire units. He's also a character that can get re-raise and courage, which is pretty cool for a tank. It makes him deceptively hard to take out for a 70 cost unit. So he can be pretty strong. Then we have Roth. So Roth is a magically based physical tank. So she'll be able to take on physical units. She also has an automatic physical aura, which is automatically starts at the first turn of the battle. It's relatively low. It's a little bit weaker even than the physical protection from Veritas of the Earth. But she doesn't have to do anything to set it up, so it's going to help you at the beginning of the fight no matter what, which is especially good against long-range challengers that are trying to apply damage very early in the fight for you. She also has some effective AoE skills. I don't want to say that they're powerful, because again, she is a tank, she's not here for damage dealing, but she can really debuff in a large AoE. She can add elemental chain lengthening to where it doesn't like go away when they take a turn, at least for one turn, which can allow you to get some pretty ridiculous chains on people, and that's really going to take people out in PvP. But also, she's just a really good stubborn tank with re-raise and with a lot of like good resistances, so she can hang in there. She is maybe kind of a generation earlier, at least as far as another story units go, but she was the ultimate another story unit for Chapter 2. So like the original Astrius and like Ashen Mon, she is the strongest of them. So she definitely ranks in comparison with some of the newer tanks. It's just that they usually do more, so I had to rank all 4 of them ahead of her. But she is still a valid tank, at least for Dark, or at least for characters that, or teams that can work in a mace unit. Then we have Veritas of the Flames. So Veritas of the Flames is kind of simple in battle in a way that I'm not a big fan of, and I think might age awkwardly. However, in terms of being able to resist physical damage, especially slash damage, very, very big into slash. In fact, he can easily get to slash nullification without even trying that hard. But he can also reduce physical damage across the board very effectively. He can also increase his physical damage across the board very effectively. So he's very hard to deal physical damage to, and he deals physical damage incredibly well himself. In addition to so much of his kit giving him different options for being able to heal upon doing damage. So he's doing big damage, he's not taking a lot of damage, and he's healing back. This can make him a pretty indomitable character. Now, I don't think that he's going to perform incredibly well in PvP because of this, or at least not as good as he does in PvE. If you can't do much damage to him and every second or third attack is going to heal him back for a lot and hit you very hard, then he can be really hard for a lot of the mobs of this game to take out. Just, even going up against several of them, he can do pretty well. And the further reincarnated he gets, the bigger of an advantage this becomes for him, because it just all kind of scales up from that. So he could be really good, but I also think that he's simple enough that he might get power crept out in some ways that other units might not. Kind of the opposite case of Helena the Black Rose, where I think she's an interesting and technical unit that has some effects that are going to be good no matter what in a certain scenario, whereas this guy is good generally, but doesn't really have any cool curveballs like that. Then we have Astrius the Erudite Bolt. This guy does a lot of damage. He is good at penetrating your defenses, at least for a unit of his time. Modern units do this a little bit better, but he keeps up with them pretty well. He's pretty close to that. He's also pretty resilient. He can take damage incredibly well, especially early in the fight. And in addition to that, he also has the ability to give himself courage removal on hit, and also can really do a whole bunch of other kind of offensive debuffing and buffing like that can be really, really strong for you. His TMR can also be a good AoE buff, at least for slash teams. So just a lot of value with this character, even though he's getting a little bit older. And even though he is newer than Elia the Alabaster in terms of lightning units, I think she's still the better. But it is also worth noting that they have a cool synergy together where she can give him, between her buffs and his, the ability to remove both re-raise and courage out any hit, which is pretty cool. I mean, that can really cut through most every character and team in some way, which makes him pretty strong for that. And also, he's a really good greatsword character, and especially when we're talking about non-limited characters, he's the second best looking at the charts right now, so he definitely has a good place on greatsword teams. Then in the final tier, if you haven't built your team already from the first 18 characters, here's the last 5 to finish things out if you need them. Elda, King of the Lions, is quite strong as a piercing character. So his LB is kind of his best and worst part, because it doesn't often trigger in fights. It really requires a very flat map for him to actually want to use it. When he does use it, it's potentially very incredible, because it will increase accuracy, attack, and CT for everyone standing around him, which could mean that your team all has a chance to attack again and take a whole nother turn with increased accuracy and attack power, which is pretty powerful when it connects. It's like a long-range version of the buff from glinting armor. That being said, if he doesn't use it on most maps, and may not be in range of his allies, even that big range doesn't necessarily help, because he really likes to get out in front and slap people, penetrate their defenses, and do a lot of damage and heal back a lot of damage while he's doing this. He's a lot like One-Wing Sephiroth in that respect, and can be quite durable in the same way that Sephiroth can be, except that he's going to be leaning a bit further into physical durability and maybe even a little bit more into damage, while lacking a little bit compared to Sephiroth in terms of his technical ability to remove positive ailments and shut down people's ability to heal, that kind of thing. So this character actually plays a lot like a Water Pierce version of One-Wing Sephiroth, but maybe a little scaled down in power and technical ability. Next we have Sunil. This is a pretty particular character. I personally am not a big fan of her because she is very finicky, it feels like, as an evasion character. However, the teams that I have seen that built her well are incredible. She is difficult to hit even if you have very high accuracy characters when built right, and she can do a pretty reasonable amount of damage, especially chaining with people as well. She doesn't necessarily overperform anyone in most respects, and in fact her kit overall seems quite dated, but she is very evasive at full potential, and if you can't hit her, then even an older kit is going to wreck you. And she's probably like the best general limited pool evasion character in the game, and building teams around her seems pretty strong if you can get her evasion to be at a point where it isn't challenged easily. Because if she is easily challenged, she's also pretty easily removed. Then we have Soul. Soul deals magic damage, he debilitates people, and he's really good into physical. He's a lot like Shurika, except that he doesn't necessarily have... No. Yeah, he's a lot like Shurika. He doesn't have the follow-up damage necessarily, but he does have the ability to like poison people on his LB, which is a certain type of follow-up damage. So you could see him a lot like that because he has a lot of the same dynamics. Magical character, very good into physical, very bad into reflect because he can one-shot himself pretty well. So another character that's just not good into Helena. But yeah. He's pretty good for fire teams. He works pretty well with wind teams as well. Then we have Jaden the Celebrated. Unfortunately, this character wasn't very celebrated. He's been probably one of the more neglected characters just because of how much stronger Alaya the Alabaster was than him, and how she was the next character up. Everybody knew they were saving for Alaya the Alabaster. Nobody really wanted Jaden the Celebrated, but many of us have slow built him, and he is quite powerful. I don't think that he is generally where Alaya is. I don't think that him or Alaya are necessarily where Elda and Helena were, and this all kind of tracks with when they were released, but of those four characters, he's definitely the least powerful. He does have a lot of cool kit though. He can reduce people's slash attack resistance penetration. He has very high slash attack resistance himself, so he can really square off against physical slash units very well because he also has an HP barrier, and if that physical slash unit is also a single target slash unit, he has the ability to give high single target resistance and also has pretty high single target resistance for himself. So this guy especially squares up very well into characters like Ashen Mont, who is very much slash and single target damage based, and a very physical character that's going to have trouble penetrating that HP barrier. Now we've seen a lot of these HP barriers already. Soul had one for physical himself, so that's not super special, but it's just really impressive how hard it can be to crack through that thing and deal damage to him, even after 3 or 4 people have hit him, even after fire characters have hit him in a lot of cases, as long as they're physical, and especially as long as they're slash. Physical slash characters just do not know how to scratch this guy in a lot of cases, and he can make that even worse for him. Now, this naturally makes him a really good partner for Veritas of the Flames. They really can reinforce each other, and they can also both push down your opponent's slash attack resistance penetration as well, so they're very good at comboing with that. And then for Hio, so Hio's always also been an underappreciated character that had a lot of potential but just wasn't quite good enough. Like, he was maybe the number 4 best greatsword character for a very long time, in a time when greatsword teams were the best. No one used him because of this, because nobody uses the number 4. But especially recently, after Master Ability 2s and after his Limit Burst upgrade, which adds just a lot of stuff into his rotation that he needed, really powers him up in a big way. And it always kind of powered him up, at least his slash attack resistance penetration, but now it just does a number of things, and I think a lot of people are being incentivized to use him in Arena at the very least right now because of the bonus structure, and maybe that's why I'm thinking highly of him now. I'm seeing a lot of people using him, but it's not working. Like, he's doing pretty good. Not good enough necessarily that I'm putting him higher on this chart. He is definitely coming in 23rd out of 23. But I think his performance this week with his upgraded LB has shown me that he maybe does deserve to be in the top 23 non-limited characters of the game. So, if you appreciated me breaking this down for you, giving you all of my thoughts on the top characters in War of the Visions, then like and subscribe. Be sure to hit that bell, and also check out the link in the description to see all the corners of the Jackie Fox Media Universe if you just can't get enough. I have another YouTube channel, a podcast of that same channel. I also write books. I have one on sale for $15 in hardback called It Even Happens While We Sleep, which is kind of a near past cyberpunk thriller that is set during the pandemic, and hopefully you guys will find interesting. And and there's also ways for you to donate to the channel if you want to show your appreciation. But those are all great ways to show your support. No matter what you do, though, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.